All right, so today we're still doing quadratic formula, but we're just going to do a couple more examples. That's all we're doing. So it's nothing brand new. So let's go for it. I think the last one we did was example 6. Is that right? Whatever it was. We're doing example 7 right now. So example 7. So that's in the book. If you want to look in the book, you don't have to, but it's in there. Look at this crazy one. 25 over 2x squared minus 30x plus 18 equals 0. Well, I know Gage isn't here because as soon as I put that fraction there, I'd hear him complaining about it. So almost. There we go. Now I feel better. All right. So what do you think we're going to do here? What do you think the first thing we're going to do? Go ahead, Carter. Well, it's in quadratic form right now because it's equal to 0. Okay, we can move the 18. Let's do that first. Is that all right? Actually, no, let's not do that because we're not completing the square, right? Because for some reason in my head, I was thinking of completing the square. All right, well, we are doing the formula. And Carter, that's probably what you were talking about, right? Quadratic formula. So we're going to use the quadratic formula. So just for fun, let's write it down. Do you have it memorized yet? Well, minus b, plus or minus, big old square root, b squared minus 4ac, and that's all over 2a. All right, so that needs to be memorized. I said it plenty yesterday. I'm repeating it now. That has to be memorized. I think to make this a little bit easier, let's just chuck this off to the side here. Okay. I think to make this a little easier, what makes this not look so easy? The 25 over 2, obviously. All of it. Okay, the 25 over 2. The over 2 part is the thing that bothers me. Would you agree? So what do you think you would do with this? I would multiply by 2. Why would I multiply by 2? Did I just randomly come up with that? It gets rid of the denominator. Exactly right. Now, I've said this a bunch of times. If I multiply this by 2, I got to multiply everything by 2. Okay? Everybody got it? Let's do this in another color so it stands out a little bit. So watch, I'm going to multiply this by 2, so that'll cancel out. But I also have to what? Multiply this by 2, and I have to multiply that by 2, and technically, what? I got to multiply that 0 by 2. But what's 0 times 2? 0. So it comes out 0 anyway, but I'm still technically multiplying that by a 2. Everybody with me? All right, so let's see if that makes it look any better. Well, that 2 and that 2 cancels out. That's the whole reason why we're doing the multiplying by 2 thing, all right, is so that that cancels out. So what am I left with? I'm left with 25x squared minus what? 60, right. 60x plus 36 equals 0. Now that looks a lot better than what we started with, okay, just because of the fraction. Now we're using the formula. So sometimes I like to do this. You don't have to do this, but for teaching purposes, I do this a lot. You got to know what your A, B, and C is. So sometimes I'll just put the A here, the B here, and the C here, but I'm going to write them out. So what is the A in this? 25. Because remember, it's ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That's the quadratic equation. This is the formula. This is the equation. So which one is the A? It's the one that's next to the x squared, which is 25. Which one is the B? It's negative 60. Right, you got to always take that sign in front. So it's a negative 60. And what is the C? 36. So now what we're going to do is we're going to plug and chug. So let's plug and chug. Now, this is negative B. It's the opposite of B. Well, B was negative 60, so what is this? It's positive 60. Everybody got that? Okay, so make sure this is negative B, which means the opposite of whatever B is. B was negative 60, so the opposite of negative 60 is positive 60. plus or minus, big old square root, and let's square some stuff. I'll tell you what, let's just write it down. Yeah, let's just write it down before we actually do the squaring. So what's b again? It's negative 60, right? But we're going to square it. So really, does that negative really make any difference? No, because it's going to come out to a positive anyway, but I'll keep it negative. Minus a 4, and then times a, and then times c. So what was the a? 25. And what was the c? 36. That whole entire thing, not just the square root, but everything, even that 60 that's stuck on the end, that's over top of 2 times a. What is the a? 25. So we plugged everything in. That's the first step. Okay, I would do that every single time. I wouldn't try to do too much in my head. I would just put everything in to that formula, and now it's just a matter of simplifying the stuff that's inside of here. So that's not too bad, is it?
No, I don't think so.
So let's do it. X equals 60 plus or minus square root. So let's do all the stuff in here. So what's negative 60 or 60 squared? 60 times 60. 3,600, right? Agreed? Now, if you wanted to, I would just do this in the calculator. Actually, you can do this one in your head. This one actually is kind of easy. Why is this one kind of easy? Because 4 times 25. What's 4 times 25? It's 100. What's 100 times 36? Look at that, 3,600. It's not always going to do that, all right, but it does this time. Over, that whole thing is over 50. We good? So let's keep going. X equals 60 plus or minus square root. What's going to be inside of this? 0 over 50. Everybody see that?
Yeah.
Now what do? It's 60 plus 0, which is 60 over 50. Agreed?
Yeah.
And then it's also 60 what? Well, we already did the plus. Minus 0, but it's still going to be 60, isn't it?
Yeah.
So are we going to get 2 answers this time? No, we just get the 1 answer. We don't keep it 60 over 50. That's super easy. What do? 6 over 5. Look at that. It started looking like you got these big old numbers. You're going to have to pull out the calculator. Did we have to pull out the calculator one time on this? Did you have to? No, you didn't have to. So that is your answer. It's just a positive 6 over 5. So this is one situation where we only get 1 answer. Okay? We'll see later on. I'm not going to deal with it now. We're going to see later on, maybe, if we get that far, where we actually graph quadratics. And by the graphing, you can see when you're going to get 2 answers, when you're going to get 1 answer, and when you're going to get no answers. Okay? But we'll talk about that later. We won't deal with that today. That's not too bad. You like the quadratic formula? Yeah, most people like it, okay, because it's usually fairly simple. Just plug it in, simplify it, boom, there's your answer. Okay, and the simplifying is usually a little easier than all the steps you had to do with completing the square. And you're probably thinking, why in the world would we ever do completing the square? Well, we wouldn't know how to do the quadratic formula, or we wouldn't know how to derive the quadratic formula unless we knew how to complete the square. You follow me on that? All right, so I think it's important to know how to complete the square, but practically, if you just had to solve for a quadratic, I would use the formula almost every single time, okay? Let's do one more. Example 8. Oh, this one really looks crazy, but we'll make it look a little more normal. But we have to do a little finagling. You ever use that word in your life? Finagle? Seems like an old person's word. That's why I used it, because I'm an old person. We're going to mess around with it a little bit, right? We're going to have to do some stuff. Now, does this look like our regular quadratic equation? No, this is our regular quadratic equation. It's got some elements that are the same, right? You got 3 things. You got it equal to 0. You got an x squared, and you got an x, and then you got a number sitting there by itself. We call that the constant. But it doesn't look quite like this. So I don't know, like, what's my A, what's my B, or what's my C in this situation, do I? That looks kind of weird. So what's definitely the thing we don't like about this? Not just it's a math problem, specifically. The fraction, obviously. What do we do on the last problem to get rid of that fraction? Multiply it by the denominator, correct? So what are we going to have to do to this? The greatest common factor, right? Or the least common multiple, okay? So the least common multiple. Let's say greatest common factor, okay? Greatest common factor is what number, because this is a 1 right here. So our denominators are 1x and x squared. If I was going to actually do a fraction, if I was going to add fractions, what would my common denominator be? If I had an x squared, an x, and a 1, my common denominator would be a 1. It's going to be the biggest thing, or the smallest thing that everything divides into evenly. So it'd be x squared. X squared would be my common denominator. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply, and again, I'll do this in another color. We're going to multiply everything by the denominator, the biggest denominator. Everybody got it? So I'm going to multiply everything by x squared. Because if I just multiplied everything by x, then this whole thing wouldn't cancel out. I'd still have an x on the denominator, wouldn't I? All right? So I didn't do enough. So I have to multiply everything by the biggest thing here, which would be the x squared. That way, everything on the bottom cancels out. Make sense?
Yeah.
So let's multiply this by an x squared. Let's multiply this by an x squared and multiply this by an x squared. And technically, we're multiplying 0 by an x squared as well. But it just ends up being a 0 anyway. Let's see what happens here. What's this going to be? If I multiply those two together, that's easy. It's just a 9x squared, right? I'm multiplying those two together. X squared times 9 is 9x squared. Nothing cancels out because it's just a 1 down here. What happens here, though? One of these x's cancels with one of these x's up here. So what am I left with here? Plus, right? Always take that sign, plus 3x. Now it's starting to look a little bit more like what we're used to. What about here? What cancels here? The whole entire x squared is canceled. So what am I left with? Minus 2 equals 0. So we took something that looked really crazy and we turned it into something that looks a lot more manageable. Would you agree? Now we're going to use the quadratic formula. What was the hint I gave you yesterday in order to memorize the quadratic formula? Write it on every problem. So we're going to do it. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Okay? And now let's plug and chug. Well, unless you want to do this. You want to do this? Let's write down our a, b, and c. Does that help? Yeah. Okay, so let's do that. Sometimes I would put just like a, b, and c right here, but sometimes people like to see it all written out like this. So what is the a? 9. What is the b? 3. What is the c? It's not 2, it's what? Negative. It's negative 2, because that's a minus in front of it. All right, now we can plug and chug. It's negative b, the opposite of b. That's what the negative means, okay? So b is 3. What's the opposite of 3? It's negative 3. Plus or minus square root. I'm going to put everything in here. Sometimes people like to do some of this stuff in their head in this next step. I'm just going to write everything out so I know I didn't make any mistakes. B squared. So this is going to be what? 3 squared. Some people might already see that and say, I'm just going to put a 9 there. And that's fine. You can if you want to. This is 4 times AC. I usually put 2 parentheses like this. What's the A? It's 9. What's the C? It's negative 2. That whole thing is over 2 times A, which is 2 times 9. There's the plugging, right? We plugged everything in. Got to make sure you put in the right signs. Don't forget your signs because that's where you can make a mistake here. And now we chug, right? We just work this thing out. That's what the chug means. It's negative 3 plus or minus square root. Let's figure out this. 3 squared is 9. Now look at your sign right here. You're going to have a negative and a negative. What's that going to give you when you multiply that? It's going to give you a positive. I don't know. Can we do this in our head? What's 9 times 4? 36 times 2? How about 72? Okay? And it's positive, right? Because you got two negatives. Over what? 18. Easy enough. All right, let's keep going. We're almost there. Plus or minus, square root. What's 9 plus 72? Can you add 9? You should add 9 real easy. So what I do is I add 10 and then take away 1. Okay, so if you add 10, that's easy. 82, take away 1, it's 81. 81, square root. I recognize that. Do you? So I don't leave it like this because I can simplify. X equals negative 3 plus or minus what? 9. And that's all over, nope, 18. Haven't simplified anything yet. Still 18. 2 times 9, it's 18 here, 18 here.
But if you go by the top, can't you do the bottom too?
Yeah, but we're going to separate them right now, okay? Because you got to divide it by the 3 as well. So watch what I'm going to do. I got two things here. You understand that plus or minus now, right? Yeah. It's negative 3 plus 9 over 18, and it's negative 3 minus 9 over 18. Let's do them separate. So it's negative 3 plus 9 over 18, and it's negative 3 what? Minus 9 over 18. Everybody understand what that plus or minus means, right? Okay. So let's do this. Negative 3 plus 9 is 6 over 18. That reduces to what? 6 goes in 18. How about 3? There you go. All right, so you guys in your arithmetic. All right, so what's this? Negative 3 minus 9 is negative 12 over 18. What divides evenly into both 12 and 18? What's the biggest number? 6 is the biggest one that divides into both of them. All right, 2 does. 3 does as well. But that means if 2 does and 3 does, that means what? 6 does. All right, so 6 goes into this, what? Twice. 6 goes into this 3 times. My answer, it's negative, don't forget the negative, 2/3. And that's your answer. Just like that. Do you remember how the book writes it, though? They usually put the smallest number first. Okay, if it comes out to like this, they usually put the smallest number first. So which one is the smallest one? The negative 2/3. And then they put a comma. Then they put the bigger one next. And they put it in this little brace thing like that. So this is the way the book writes it. This is the way that I write it. I'm good either way. All right, but I just want you to realize when you turn to the back of the book and look at the odd answers and you see this, it means the exact same thing as this. All right, I'm fine either way. I really have no preference. That's it. Seems like it's getting easier now, doesn't it? Yeah. That's unusual. Usually it gets harder and harder, doesn't it? But this time it seems a little bit easier. So here's your homework. So it's section 1-2. I think this is the third one, so we'll call it C. Is that what they called it on the thing? I didn't even put it on there, did I? I'm looking at another one. Oh, that's right. I didn't give you one for this week. I'm looking at last year's because I have last year's stuck in here. We did this on December 2nd last year, so kind of gives you an idea. All right. So, but it's page 107. And it's 47 to 69, and we're only doing the odds. That's not so bad. I'm pretty sure all of these are quadratic formulas, okay? I'm pretty sure they are. You can double check if they are or not, but I'm pretty sure they are. All right, so you have like 19 minutes, okay, to work on this. That's a lot of time. Don't just blow this off and close everything and just wait for class to be over. All right, let's make sure we're working. Okay, start right now. Open up your book and start working on these. If you don't have a book, sit next to somebody that's got a book so you can look off of theirs. All right, have a good weekend.